live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. We haven't really had a chance to talk about this, so I figured I'd ask you, are you excited about the early reveal from the new college football game?
I talked about it a little. I saw the trailer. I talked to you on social media about it. I think that I was so excited about the game that I quite honestly didn't really last year. Like, I knew changes would come and I knew things would get better, you know, so I didn't give it like a bad rating or anything. They do need to make some fixes, but I got to be honest with you, brother. I am so invested to postseason baseball right now. And I got to admit, your Rhode Island Rams absolutely screwed the pooch. They absolutely pissed down their leg.
I didn't watch any of it, but I don't need to hear any of this.
They let the worst team in the tournament absolutely beat the dog shit out of them. It was embarrassing. It was the most embarrassing weekend of baseball I've ever seen in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
So does Little Rock advance? How does that
Little Rock did advance. They played this today, and they just upset arguably the biggest mid-major in the country in DBU. So it's not
how does that work? Do they go to the next?
So, yes, tonight, the final in Baton Rouge between Little Rock and LSU is at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Okay.
Everybody's sticking out because, like, Vanderbilt, it's basically a double elimination.
Okay.
So you got a loser's bracket, winners bracket, but Vanderbilt lost, which it's Vandy in the 21st century. But, I mean, I'm just telling you, I am fully invested in postseason baseball.
Yeah, I know that you're completely embedded. Did not pay one lick of attention to my Rhody Rams. Maybe they would have won if I actually had watched them play, but that didn't.
No, you would have been embarrassed. You would have turned the TV off.
How bad did they lose by?
They gave up 22 runs the last game that they played.
They gave up Stop.
You're no, go look it up. They gave up 22 runs. I'm not joking with you. They gave up 22.
There's no way.
Do you want to? I'll bet you $100,000 right now. You want to bet?
Oh my God, 22 to 10.
Don't you dare test me on this.
It's got to be some sort of a record.
Well, maybe so. But listen, you're facing it off against some really good teams, and it is the postseason. But
not Little Rock, though. They don't have the resources of Rhody.
Little Rock beat DBU just now.
Bullshit. That means nothing to me. 22 runs to a team that you were telling me didn't even belong in the tournament.
They didn't belong in the tournament, and they in Rhode Island got their ass.
That's some
you
bullshit.
Boys from Jersey don't really know how to play baseball.
But Jersey, I mean,
their entire team's pretty much made up of guys from New Jersey.
Of course it is.
Mm-hmm.
Of course it is.
Mm-hmm. Got y'all's asses whooped by these Southern boys.
There's some really good baseball players that have come from the state of New Jersey, so I don't want to hear that.
You just got dumped on. Like this is not another team movie.
There's too many Rhode Island guys on this team now that I'm looking at it. That's probably what cost him.
Probably did. All right. But there was some good news. I did see the reveal to your point. Let me ask you this before we get rolling here. I'm in love, but I love that the coaches are in the game.
If I got to be very honest about this, I understand why the coaches would say yes to this and why I don't know how much they're getting paid for their likeness being put in the game. I would hope that it's
said that they're not getting paid.
Okay. Never mind what my take was about to be. It is a good recruiting tactic for coaches, especially smaller programs, for recruits as they're coming up to learn the names of coaches and stuff like that.
Well, that's what Stark talked about. Just to interrupt you, it's exactly what he goes, could you imagine Chris Fowler talking about me and what we built at Texas on a video game?
Right.
Could you imagine?
Yeah, it's just more brand exposure and whatnot. I was going to complain if they're spending money on coach likeness. I was going to bitch about that because that is a waste of time, money, and resources that needs to go towards improving other things.
No, they're not. Most of them, I'm not going to say all, but most of them are not getting paid from this. But I will promise you this, whether Brian Kelly in reality or real life wins a national title or he's going to do it. But regardless if that happens, in Blake Ruffino's world, he's going to win it on a video game. I promise you that.
Does he do the dance? Is that going to be put in the game?
He can do whatever in the goddamn he wants if he wins a national title here. I'll dance with him.
Well, in real life or in the video game.
Mark my words. I will give $20,000 to the collective right now if I knew that they were going to win a national title. Right, make it all.
I'm going to hold you. I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay, but here's the problem. I don't think. Understand. Remember 2 years ago when LSU won a national baseball championship with Paul Skeens, how much that warranted things.
Right. I'm going to hold you to that though. If that actually ends up happening. But outside of that though, the game reveal, I'm excited. It got me juiced up again, even though we still have the game and I've been playing it. I was playing it last night. Road to Glory needed to get fixed. It seems like they're fixing it. It seems like that they're putting a little bit more depth into it with the high school version. That was the best part about Road to Glory and not just jumping to a single team. They got to fix the progression system. The old progression system was the best. Being able to create a player that was like overpowered was so fun. That it's impossible. You can't get to 99 overall unless you change the experience sliders, which is really stupid. So hopefully that's fixed. There's a couple of small things that I'm sure that they're going to fix.
See, I didn't even know about the experience sliders.
I think that it's going to get fixed. I would hope so. Otherwise, because that was one of the lamest parts about it is that the career mode wasn't entertaining. It's just basically Dynasty, and that was the only fun. That
I got to be real with you. It's all I played. It's all I
was Dynasty.
Was Dynasty because I took Texas State to a couple playoff games. Got to take Texas State there. All right, Joe. Some good news in college football before we get rolling here is the Hall of Fame is making changes to their qualifications to what can get you in the Hall of Fame, lowering their standard from overall winning percentages for head coaches to 58.9% that would be eligible for guys like Mike Leach. He's not the only one. Les Miles is also in that or in that area as well, but a lot of people focused in on Mike Leach. They're calling it the Mike Leach rule. Your thoughts on the Hall of Fame managing a situation but changing their qualifications to get in?
Yeah, and I know that there's other coaches that this includes now, but the big statement that was put out by the College Football Hall of Fame was that they wanted to be able to recognize coaches that did more than just have big on-field accomplishments. And it's a little sad that Mike Leach is going to theoretically possibly get in the near future after his passing. But I think that it brought to light the ridiculousness of that rule. I almost kind of wish they would lower it a little bit more, like closer to like 55%. I don't know of many coaches off the top of my head right now that have had the same type of change and impact on the game like Mike Leach has, but I'm sure that there could be other examples. Why this is great is because Leach created the modern version of college football that we see today for the most part. A lot of offenses take air raid principles. They have evolved off of them. Some of the best coaches and offensive coordinators in the sport in the last 15 years, some of which that have gone on to the NFL, have had air raid principles in their offense. If it wasn't for Mike Leach, we would not have seen the surge in offensive production and the entertainment value improve in the sport the way that it has.
Well, you think of the principles that have come off of it. You think of Lincoln Riley. You think of what's going on in the NFL with Cliff Kingsbury. Mm-hmm. You think of the 2019 team with Joe Burrow and them. I mean, a lot of different principles, air raid principles in that year. Just so many different things in Mike Leach. And by the way, he changed the game from his personality standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the one who said that we should go to 16-team playoff. Look at us now. He warned us literally 4 years ago that we were going to go to a 16-team playoff. Nobody believed him. Nobody believed him. Now look at us. Joe, right, now look at us. And
right,
if he
he's
were alive today, what would Mike – well, here's the thing. I thought about this during the whole Mike Leach thing. What would Mike Leach be saying right now if he, God rest his soul, what would he be saying now with everything that's going on? He would have been saying, told you so. Right. I mean, he was very innovative.
Right. He, in not just on the field, but I know that his eccentric personality and his very unique communication style was always really fun. He was entertaining. There was never a time that you were hating Mike Leach. Like, there was never an instance where you're like, oh, I can't believe he said that. I can't believe he did this. He was everybody's favorite coach that wasn't a big national championship winning coach. But I think you're right. He saw a lot of changes happen before they did. And that was exemplified by the way that he coached, the way that he orchestrated and created offenses, that he was able to see what that next phase was. And you just mentioned the playoff stuff and the change to the sport to where it is right now. He was one of the earliest, I don't want to use the word adopters, but I think he was the most open to the future changes that we have, which is the right approach to have when things are changing within the sport.
Yeah, I mean, look, I will say this. I know that as an example, him not being the only one, I'm going to say this, and for some, people aren't going to like this, but Les Miles is also eligible. And I know the way that Les Miles, his career ended with the sexual assault claims and things that, quite frankly, coming from Sharon Lewis, just a little backstory, that wound out in court being proven false. So I don't know if you can talk about the 2000s without Les Miles. You cannot talk about college football from 2000 to 2010 without him. You just can't. And even if you want to go to 2011 with them and Bama facing off, that's what really changed the sport to a playoff. LSU versus Bama in that 2011, it's technically in January 2012, they're the reason that 14 playoff came 3 years after.
See, that's a really good point. I was kind of wondering, as you mentioned there, my focus had been so much on Mike Leach that like I didn't even consider or do digging enough on like who some of the other coaches were that were now eligible, that were in that, you know, that were like 15. I think he's like, if you're above 59.5 is now the new threshold.
And he had like 60 wins vacated, and he doesn't feel like that he should have.
I doubt that gets changed, but
no, LSU upheld the vacation. No, well, wait. That's the wrong way.
No, I think vacation's a right use.
Yeah, but I think of the word vacation. I feel like I'm going to the beach. But no, they upheld it. The courts upheld it here about 2 months ago.
You're right, though. If that one Alabama LSU national championship is what sparked and pissed off so many people to say, like, this is wrong. We shouldn't be using.
Yeah, they thought Oklahoma State should have gotten in, and I thought the BCS, even though my team lost, I thought they got the two best teams in. Like, sincerely.
Of course you did.
Well, no, I mean, Oklahoma State lost in that Big 12 title game. Alabama was the best team that year. They won the national title. They lost by 3 and then won I mean, Joe, like 87 players from both of those teams played in the NFL. Like, I mean, I just think they got both of them right. I wish we would have had Oklahoma State. I pray to God that Brandon Whedon's old hip injury having ass would have been out there. We would have won another title. But I do think the two best teams played again.
Well, it kind of makes you wonder what could have happened if that was a year where there was a 14 playoff. I'm not going to go as far as to think like what would happen if it was a 16-team playoff, but
I don't think anybody that year's beating LSU or Bama. I really don't. Let's debate about other years, but that 11 LSU defense, Tyrann Mathieu and the boys, no. There's a lot of things I'll concede on LSU, not that one, not that 2011 team. I won't.
All right, I'll take your word. I'll take your word for
2015, 16, 17, 18. Yes, I'll concede on a lot of shit. But
did we move off the BCS by then?
Yeah, we had moved off. But a lot of people thought that, they were better than what they were, and they weren't. 2019, they were dominant.
Obviously.
All right. But in reference to back to the main point here, to your point, it's going to be interesting to see what other coaches are going to be able to get in because of this. But I think Mike Leach deserves it. I 1,000% believe that. I mean, he innovated the sport, man.
I don't know when the next induction class is, and I don't know when this opens back up. I want to say it's pretty soon off the top of my head.
I don't think he should be a first ballot. First time that he's eligible. He hasn't been able to be eligible for it. So now this would be the first time that he's on the ballot.
Well, they changed the rule clearly with some sort of indication that this was related to Mike Leach. Don't you think it would feel a little odd if they didn't push him in after?
Now that you say that,
I feel like that he's going to get pushed to the front of the line.
Now that you say that, you're probably right.
I don't know what other coaches off the top of my head are eligible at the current moment, but
would you put Mike Leach in over Les Miles?
I think so. Just because of the complication of, like, we saw how long it took for Pete Rose to get in. I know it's completely different.
Well, I mean,
to be eligible.
In Les's case, I mean, he was found innocent.
I understand that.
You can't hold him guilty if he's held innocent in court, Joe. I mean, you can't do that.
No, I know, but like when it comes to the voting process with things like that, there's just general biases still after the fact. If those wins were removed, how effectively are they accounted for in the decision-making process to let him in? I still think that Mike Leach probably would get in before him because nobody's headlines this weekend were about Les Miles. They were all about Mike Leach.
Right. So good point. Very, very good point. All right. Let's get moving here. Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at BetOnline. We'll come back and talk about Brett and Yormark taking a small, subtle shot at the SEC, even though I didn't really think it was a shot. But it looks like the Big 12 is going to be in favor of the 5+11 ruling. So we'll talk about that when we come back. We'll dive into Texas A&M and as we continue in those deep dives as well. Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at BetOnline. During the break, everyone do us a favor. Hit the like and share. Share to all those groups a year back when we're talking about the Big 12 and Yormark and Texas left their ass.
That does feel a little dirty. If I'm being honest, that does feel a little gross doing that.
Does feel very dirty. But, Joe, some big comments coming out of the Big 12 this week in reference to Commissioner Brett Yormark as he responds to some of the comments that Greg Sankey had over the last couple of days in SEC spring meetings. But Brett Yormark coming out in massive favor for the 5+11. I'm not going to read everything that he states here. He talks about that it's best for football. He brings up Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey saying they need to do what's best for the sport, not just for their conferences. But it seems as if the Big 12 is in favor of the 5 automatic qualifiers plus 11 at-large bids for a 16-team playoff. Joe, do you smell what's cooking right now? I don't. I think he's saying that because the best interest of the Big 12, the way that he sees it. I don't think that Brett Yormark and the Big 12 are coming out here in reference to saying, oh, we're just saying what's best for the sport. That sounds like horseshit to me.
I kind of love like how the athletic directors, unlike all the coaches, the administrators, any of that stuff, it really gives off high school lunch table vibes. Like seriously, we can sit here and listen to statements and read statements, and then afterwards on the show, we get to interpret them. I think there's 2 ways to look at this. I think one thing that we didn't talk about before the show, maybe that this is some sort of feud that's building between them and the Big Ten. We know that the Big Ten aggressively was against the 5-11 model. They were we talked about this on Wednesday, they were trying to produce stipulations for the change to the SEC schedule for them to add a 9th game. We talked about how the SEC, no way in hell, is going to want to do that. The Big Ten's trying to be difficult. What does Yormark have to gain jumping in here and saying, oh, we're for the 5-11 model? For the most part,
another team. That's what I think.
We'll get to kind of like talking about the future outlook for the Big 12 in a second, and some of our thoughts on how this conference is going to look in a few years. But is there something that we don't know about between him and Petitti and the Big Ten? Like, is there something that we're missing here, that he's kind of trying to take a shot at Petitti? Because that's like the first thing that comes to mind, that he's got some sort of a problem that he is airing out. He understands that he technically doesn't really have any say in the decision-making here because it's the Big Ten and the SEC. He's picking a side, and he's picking the SEC side for one reason that we're unaware of.
Which is so funny because the SEC took his 2 top performing teams in Oklahoma and Texas.
Right.
So I don't think that it's a shot at Tony Petitti as much as it is that they think in a 5 automatic qualifier plus 11 at-large bid seating, they always feel as if that the Big 12 can get 2 teams in. Always. Right? Like I feel like they think that they can do that. Now, they didn't last year. But if you go to a 4-4-2-2-1 model, I think that the Big 12 is a little bit wanting to be hesitant in reference to some of those teams going into this playoff and getting exposed. I don't think they want to play the games, if I'm being honest. I think they want a chance to build a little bit, because if you're able to get one team in and then let it play out, I don't know how much they're willing to want to get more teams in. I think he runs a little bit scared because, Joe, we talked about Texas, Arizona State last year. That's fine. Joe, the Big 12 has been getting their asses kicked when it comes to playing in the playoff. I mean, absolutely getting abused, whether it be TCU with Georgia, whether it be Oklahoma, whether it be Texas to some extent with Washington. They have gotten exposed. I think that he feels as if, I'm sure that they've done their numbers and feel as if at a 16-team playoff that they can get more than two teams in. Because in the 15-16 model, if a team is 10-2, 11-1, they're going to be around there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a look at it. Joe, BYU and Iowa State were in that 15-16 mark. So at what point do you look at it and say, well, maybe we can really push and get in here and try to get into the field of 16? Now, I'm not saying that he's running and being scared here, but there is one thing. For whatever reason, it feels as if that he's trying to come out and say, we're doing in the Big 12, we're doing what's best for the sport. I don't believe him.
Yeah, I think it's a BS. That's like such jargony BS cliche response.
Without a doubt. He is bullshitting his way through this. He feels that they can get in more teams in the 5+11, and there may be some years that they don't have two teams that deserve to get in, and they don't want that to be exposed. But I will tell you this, he's not wrong. And I do think as if the ACC is going to get on board with this, and I do feel like that the SEC, Big 12, and ACC will agree to this, and the Big 10 might be left out. And I think it might be for the best overall thing because they're pointing out one conference. They're only pointing out the SEC in this. We talked about this on Wednesday. The Big 10 having issues with not going to 4-4-2-2-1 +3. Why do they want to do that one? See, we debated this the whole time. What we didn't debate was, why does the Big 10 want that so badly?
I think that they want security. I mean, they want security. They want
exactly. But why
they don't want to land into an uncertain future?
It's like a girlfriend or wife who always wants you to tell them that they're pretty and that they're not fat in their dress. Why do they want security?
They understand, and this is how I'm reading into it, and this is not me saying that the Big 12, the Big 10 isn't strong enough to continue to
It's
rise.
not, but
wait, so they at the current moment are hot right now. They're very hot right now. They want to take advantage of the fact that they're hot right now to maintain a hold of the power over what the future conference looks like.
Bingo.
I don't know if they think that down the line they're going to slip. I don't know what it is. We know what the top teams are in the conference. There are 4 really good teams in the Big 10 consistently. And then there's a couple of teams that are usually floating around there. So maybe there is a fear with the teams that are floating around there that we could end up in a situation where Illinois, USC, Washington, whatever it is, Michigan, are all beating up on themselves. They're fearful that those teams won't get into the mix because they finished with 4 losses, whatever it ends up being. But I think that's to that point where they see that they have power right now. They want to continue the momentum and they want to hold on to it. They want to look towards the long term of understanding of like, if we're locked into 4 spots, we're guaranteed that much money. And then we just hope that every single year that maybe we get a 5th team in.
There you go. They want the security from the financial standpoint, which the other conferences are saying, we're confident enough. Look, give us one auto bid and then let the field decide. Joe, what's wrong with that? Like, if that's where if we want to do auto qualifiers, fine. It's basically, Joe, at the end of the day, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically what the NFL does. Whoever wins their division gets in. And then you have at large after that. Do you not?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, it's a 5+11 model. Joe, how many teams? I mean, there's more divisions, but how many teams get into the NFL playoff? It's
7.
16.
No.
Or it's 8. No, it's not 8.
There's an odd number. It's 7 on each side.
Oh, 7.
Am I
Wait. 14
wait.
teams get into the playoff. Yeah, it is 14. You're right. 14 teams get into the playoff.
Yeah, it's 14.
So win your division, you have an auto qualifier, and everything else is at large with wild card.
Yes.
Why not go to it? Why not play your way in? Now I have another thought here.
Well, actually, wait. Hold on, everyone. Quick. So the only thing that kind of flows into that though is almost half of the teams in the NFL get in. So why is their playoff so much bigger than college football?
There's only 32, and they don't have enough. But everybody's playing each other damn near in the regular season.
So that's the point.
But hold on, okay. You're almost playing half the teams any damn way. You play a division outside. I mean,
I was mostly just taking a shot at those that are completely against the 16-team playoff for college football. Is like we have that many teams that get in for.
You have 130 something. You're going to do a 70-team playoff?
No, you're not going to do that. I'm not advocating for that at all. And I've said that 16 is the bigger expansion, the biggest expansion point. I'm more so pointing out that I don't think there's anything wrong with doing 16 teams, and we've talked about this.
Let me throw this out there to you. Big Ten, you're about to do a deal with the SEC that you guys will match up in the beginning of the season. Am I wrong there, Joe? Because that's what I'm understanding, correct?
That's expected, yep.
Why don't we let the field decide? If the Big Ten teams win, let's say they go 6-4 in games, fine. You will get that extra team that's 9-3 in over a team that's in the SEC because you showed on the field that your conference is deeper. I mean, am I the crazy one here? You're going to play it out on the field any damn way. So if the Big Ten goes 7-3 against the SEC, why wouldn't Illinois get in over South Carolina or Bama? Because it's a tougher league, right? It played out on the field. Can we let the field decide?
Well, I mean, this is why I'm consistently a strong advocate for. As somebody who played at a FCS program, we both did. I know that removing the gimme games, the bye games, the easy victories, those things, it kind of kills part of the sport. Those programs are going to be hurting for money. But having a full slate, the NFL, you're for the most part, you're playing all evenly matched teams. Even a team as bad as Cleveland Browns, Carolina Panthers, they can pull off an upset and a victory because there's still NFL players on the roster. And I'm saying this to say that having competitive scheduling across the board, all 12 regular season games, or at least 11 of the 12 regular season games are against Power 4 opponents. I think that that's ultimately one of the bigger solutions. I know that we're kind of veering off of the conversation, the starting point of where we got with this, with the playoff formation.
But we're really not. We're really not in the grand scheme of things, which is so wild in all of this.
Well, at the end of the day, what would be best for the sport is if there was a way. I don't know how you would create a system to do this. You'd need to figure out some sort of revolving setup. Every team should play a team in the other Power 4 conferences. I know that would be a shit show. You probably wouldn't have any FCS or G5 games in that situation, but you should have to find a way to schedule an ACC, a Big 12, and an SEC team if you're a Big 10 team. That would solve our problem. Would it not? It would be a proving point. This is the record that you had. And I know that doesn't necessarily truly solve it because Alabama can go and schedule Northwestern.
Well, what do you do with Group of 5? Because they have an automatic qualifier too. See what I'm saying?
I mean, Group 5 shouldn't even be in the playoff.
I fully agree with that. I fully agree with that. But listen, at the end of the day, back to Yormark's comments. He says that he wants to do what's best and not what's best for the conferences. He implores Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti to do what's best for the sport and not the conferences. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, like me coming out here saying that we want a 5+11 is showing no conference any favor. I'm not showing the SEC any favor. We're not showing the Big Ten any favor. Why not do that? Because the best will decide the best. Like, that's just how. If that's the rule of what we're given, I would rather the teams that are proving it on the field to do it. Like, I hate bringing up this point up every time to what Yormark is saying, but I want the field to decide, and I think that's what he's saying. At least in his own bias, it feels to me that it is what's best for the sport.
I'm kind of shocked by how candid Yormark is in this statement, because
I am too.
This is one of the first commissioners to not play the politic game of just looking towards what is best for his conference. I think that there's an underlying thought here of an expectation that, like, 5 to 10 years from now, what this conference can be, what the best teams in the conference are. There's a way for them to maximize the 5 and 11 compared to if they're slotted into 2 spots. But this is one of the talking points that I had when we originally talked about the model that had 4 locked in spots for the Big 10 and the SEC, and then 2 for the ACC and the Big 12, is that it is still an advantage for the SEC and the Big 10, and it is a huge negative for the Big 12 and the ACC because there's less opportunities, a lot less opportunities. Having mostly at-large bids creates a chance in multiple years where a conference like the Big 12 could have 3 or maybe even 4 teams that get in. I think if we look at college football right now, results on the field are not going to reflect this. But if we read more so into stories that we read about really rich alumni bases pumping in NIL into programs, a number of the most underrated programs that haven't been successful in the past but keep getting brought up are in the Big 12. And the ones that I'm talking about, there's 4 that come to mind. BYU has a crap load of money. They just signed the number 1 college basketball recruit who's not even from Utah or anywhere near the region that he's going to go play there. Arizona State, there was a whole article this weekend where Kenny Dillingham, couldn't read it because it was behind a paywall, but I saw one of the quotes where Kenny Dillingham thought that they could be this decade's Clemson, where the funding is there. Arizona State is a big alumni base, a very rich alumni base. I think that Texas Tech has a crap load of oil money, and they have shown a willingness to spend money. They could turn into a really good football program.
And they're spending the shit out of it too, man.
Right.
I mean,
right.
we've already talked about them. They might win the conference, dude.
All over the place. And then Colorado, for their own unique approach of having the marketability of Deion Sanders, could set them up for long-term success. So I think that as right now we've talked about how the Big 12, there's no clear best team. I think in 3 years from now, we're going to be talking about those 4 teams, and then the rest are like decent. They're decent programs. If you put out enough,
you forgot about the biggest one of all.
Who?
Utah. And we're allowing.
I think Utah's going to get passed. I don't think that they have the same level of money.
Well, they very well may. But let's not forget that they still were in the Pac-12 beating the teams that they shouldn't have.
But that was because of Whittingham. As soon as Whittingham retires, I don't think that Utah is going to be as good as they were for that stretch.
We'll see. I mean, I'm not going to allow a down year to crazy Mormon shit happens out in Utah.
But they're not a Mormon school though.
I don't give 2 shits.
No, but this is my point, is that all the money is on the Mormon side that goes to BYU.
Okay, well, you can't convince me Utah ain't got Mormons.
Oh, it does. I don't know enough about the state of Utah.
By the way, did you see the whole viral TikTok this week of BYU students, what they call fluffing?
No. What are you talking about?
They can't have relations, so they just they touch each other and they call it fluffing.
But what video are you talking about, man?
It was viral on TikTok. This girl said that she's the fluff queen, the fluff queen.
real hard hitting college football now.
I'm just saying. I mean,
that's why that's why they'll end up being they'll be a great football program because they're getting paid a shitload of money and none of the guys in the football team could get laid.
They're all getting
no, but it's gonna be all pent up frustration from testosterone. So they're just taking it out on who they're facing each week.
They're fluffing each other. They're so fluffed up. I'm never living that one down. Ever living that one down. Regardless of that. Look, lastly, for me on this, I just want the best 16 in. We can have debates on who we think the best 16 are in, having 5 auto qualifiers means absolutely nothing, because the teams that win their conference are going to get in anyway, right? Like, I mean, you're basically just saying, hey, we're all going to get in for the champion. Maybe there's an upset, but that team would have gotten in anyway.
You're saying a lot of things that I've said before, and you argued with me on. I know it's different because the playoff is expanding, and now 16 teams.
Well, hold on.
Very rare that like a shit.
I don't agree with this model. Hold on now. I don't agree with this model. Arguing with you, if you're asking me what I would do, I don't like this model.
You want all at large. You would want.
I would want all at large. Correct. But if you're making me choose, which basically you're making me choose. Why the fuck would I ever want to do 4-4-2-2-1 plus 3? Why would I ever want to do that? Like,
I mean, I agree. I have agreed with you. The side that I have always stood on is the 5-11 model. I have always thought that the 5-11, there needs to be a mix of the really locked in AQs and then the idea that you have brought up, which is all at large.
Now, the reason I pushed back on the 5-11 was because I still don't agree that some conferences get an automatic bye, but they went to straight seeding.
Yes.
So now so it is constantly evolving. I would go just because Joe, here's the thing. For an example, if a team loses in the SEC or Big Ten championship game and we didn't do straight seeding like how it was set up last year, I didn't believe that Arizona State and Boise State deserved to have a bye. I didn't. I just didn't. I thought it was atrocious.
We agreed on that.
Right.
We agreed on that pretty closely.
If you're asking me, Blake Ruffino's God's honest opinion, if you're going to force me into 16 teams at large, I don't put them all in. We'll debate about the other stuff. And Joe, when you start expanding this, I mean, you're talking about teams that not only are 9-3, but Joe, some of them are 8-4, asking if we should get in. At that point, there's got to be a point where you're like, well, hey man, don't lose to this team and you're in.
I just don't think that we're ever going to be in that territory. I really don't. I really don't think that we will be in situations where there's going to be teams that are that bad that are going to be in the mix. It might be like in the NFL where they throw on the graphic on the screen during the game, still in the hunt. And you see the New York Giants that are like 3-12. And it's like, well, technically, if like a million things happen, they're still in the hunt. You're never going to have something that ridiculous in college football. Instead, you'll get the graphic that shows in the hunt, and it'll show a 3-loss team after like week 9, and they need to beat like 2 huge teams on their schedule. But we're all smart enough to know that they can't accomplish that.
Well, what you will do is, let's say that you have 8-3 Nebraska versus 8-3 Iowa. That becomes a playoff eliminator. Which,
I think if that game is bad enough, the committee and whatever decision-making process that they build, which we've talked about the possibility of them
last game winning like 10-7,
people
were smoothed out.
If the game is shit enough, I would think that any determining factors, we don't know what it's going to look like, what the committee is going to look at. That is still kind of up in the air, something that's not getting talked about enough. I think that there'd be enough intervention there to be like, okay, they didn't do enough in these final weeks. They haven't done enough throughout the entirety of the season. I just find it really hard to believe. Most importantly, though, Blake, neither of those teams in that situation would go to their conference championship. Like, I don't think that we're going to get into a spot where, an Iowa State, Arizona State situation.
Right. There's not divisions. Right. I mean, it's all at large. I mean, shit, Joe, the conferences are at large.
Yeah.
I mean, think about what we're saying here. Basically, all we're saying is the conferences are at large. Why in the Rudy Poo hell would I make my playoff not that? You've had divisions for how long? Joe, they've had divisions for how long? When will we have seen Georgia and Texas again? Penn State, Oregon. I mean, it's all at large.
Yeah. And that was one of the smartest things the conferences did, was doing away with the divisions, because that would have been this is something that I don't think I've heard anyone talk about. That would have been a cluster F in the 16-team playoff, or maybe even in the 12-team playoff, if we witnessed some of the years like we did where Iowa went to the Big Ten championship game and we're thinking, why the hell Iowa doesn't belong there?
Yes, we did see it. SMU. We saw it with SMU. Yeah, we did. We did.
No, they weren't their division. There were no divisions in the.
I get that, but
I'm talking about specifically like there were no.
But we saw a
team that lucked in because of their division.
Well, no. You're right. It's not division, but we saw a team get walked in because just because they lost in their conference championship game should mean that they're not eliminated.
I think that's a little bit different, and I think that we need it. It's the first year that we did it. I will keep repeating this. The best thing that could have happened for the college football playoff is that the first year ended up being in an entertaining final 4 games, but the rest of it was a shit show. Because the rest of it being a shit show made us highlight, worst possible things happened. Clemson winning, SMU losing, Boise State getting a bye, Arizona State getting a bye. Those were all the worst possible things that could have happened for this first year, but it didn't impact the final outcome because we ended up getting a justified champion that deserved it in Ohio State. We needed those messy things to happen in order to fix it. It would have been awful if it took like 4 or 5 years down the line for us to realize those mistakes, because then everybody would have been saying, oh, this is an outlier. This is only 1 out of the 5 years. We can't go around making changes because 1 year it was weird.
I do feel like last year's situation was an outlier based off of what we'd seen. Is it the norm, or is it going to continue to be the norm, or is it the outlier? Because
it was one.
Right. Well, right now it is. If this continues to happen, right, and 10-2 teams, 8 seeds keep winning, all right, fine. But the last time Ohio State won a national title, Joe, they had to blow out the team in their conference championship game, and some people thought they didn't belong because they had a third-string quarterback and they went in there and won it. They beat Bama. That whole run for them was really unique. So actually, believe it or not, you want to hear a funny stat? It's the last time that the SEC has not been a part of back-to-back national titles. Whether they lost one, they always returned and won the other, right? That year when we changed the playoff the last time, same situation with the SEC. Let's see what happens to them. But again, give me at large. That's what I would do. Agree to disagree? I don't know. Do we have any super chats?
No super chats.
No, we do not. Okay. Let's get to it here. So, Joe, we continue on our deep dives. Tonight, we go down to College Station and talk about the Texas A&M Aggies. Joe, how about this? The Texas A&M Aggies were the number 1 team in the SEC in the start of November.
I still don't know how that happened.
Well, they only had 1 loss, and that was to Notre Dame, who was also trending to a playoff run. When we look back in the year 1 of Mike Elko, now going into the 2025 season, how do you see the Texas A&M Aggies faring?
We spent a good amount of time when we looked at the transfer portal and recruiting and just roster changes throughout this offseason. We've spent a good amount of time highlighting a lot of the great things that Texas A&M is doing. And we're going to dive into that. I really like the core of players that are coming back for this Aggies team. We can talk schedule prediction towards the end of this. We can talk expectations for Marcel Reed and what he's going to do. But knowing that they're bringing back Trey Zune, who could be a really important offensive lineman for them, and Chase Basantis, who could be one of the higher drafted guards in the upcoming draft. But the one thing that caught my attention outside of, I love the corner pairing that they have with Des Ricks and Will Lee. I think that more people need to be talking about Texas A&M quietly having one of the best running back duos in college football. There's a little bit of a contingency here because Le'Veon Moss tends to get banged up, and he is a very hard running.
He's coming off an ACL too.
Right. He's got a very hard running style. Reuben Owens returning towards the end of the season last year, and he was a guy who was a little bit banged up. If those guys, and it's a big if they stay healthy, Blake, they could have a very dynamic running game, a very explosive, difficult to stop running game. I watched Lev Moss's highlights. I broke down his all 22 and I graded him for the 2026 class this weekend, and I was blown away. I gave him a mid third round grade. He is explosive. He's the strongest running back in the class from what I've seen. I've watched a lot of running backs in this class. I really freaking love him. And I think that him, Moss, and Owens are going to play off of each other really well with Marcel Reed, who is one of the more athletic quarterbacks, if not one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the country. This rushing attack is going to carry this team as far as they're going to try and get to. How far that is, we'll get to in a second, but I'm already feeling pretty good about that core right there.
I mean, you took my number one take. The only thing I would add is well, you did talk about Basantis there a little bit earlier, but with an experienced offensive line, based off of what Colin Klein wants to do, and let's just be frank, the temperament of what Mike Elko wants to do. What does Mike Elko want to do? He comes from the defensive side of the football where we want to have time of possession and dominate you up front and just attack you by running the football. That is their style of play. That is what he's trying to build. We all know that. The question will be, as you mentioned, can Reuben Owens, Le'Veon Moss, how does he come back out of that ACL? Is he ready to go in the start of the season, which was kind of midway to the inner part of the season where he tore his ACL? Is he ready to go? I mean, ACLs are not as big as they once were. Normally not the year, but a little bit sooner. I agree with you on how they're trying to build a team. In that, you add somebody in Casey Concepcion who can do a lot of different versatile things for you when you need him to. Joe, I am very intrigued by A&M. The question that I will have is, down the stretch at the end of the season, with injuries included, it felt like that you got outmanned, like you got out-physicaled. And we'll talk about that more from the defensive side of things. But the biggest catalyst for me here is where I thought you hit the nail on the head. Just Marcel Reed, who we saw take the starting job last season, how does he progress? I think he's got to get better throwing the football. Joe, one of the worst quarterbacks in the SEC on third down, but, well, that especially in November, but he had a lot of explosive plays of why people turn their heads and watch this kid. That whole Florida game was ridiculous. He did some ridiculous things last year. Quite frankly, I thought was the only reason why they had a shot against Texas at the end of the year. If they can progress and stay healthy, I think they could be they can be really good and physically offensively. Joe, the question will be is how are they going to be able to perform in the passing game? Third down passing was bad. He was below 60%. He was 52%. He's got to be better there. Regardless of all that, I think they'll be physical. My thing going into them, injuries played a massive factor last year. Are we watching them on paper or are we looking at them as what they currently are? That's a lot of injuries to overcome. Basantis has been banged up the last 2 years. How does that progress? So I see a lot of talent. I need to see it through the entire season before I make a determination. And look, last year, I was higher on Marcel Reed than most. I went on with our good buddy Carter Bryant and said, hey, man, I don't know if he's not a top 5 quarterback in the SEC or projected to be one. And I got laughed out of the room. Now everybody's on this Marcel Reed kick. So there comes a part where I do think if he progresses, especially with Colin Klein, they could be something. But defensively, we'll talk about in a moment, is where I'm like, uh-oh, hold on.
They fit into that bubble for me, Blake, that there's a couple of teams that we've already started to talk about where we already did the top teams for the most part. And we've kind of entered into this secondary grouping where we're trying to find like which teams have the most promise. I think Texas A&M is one of those teams that has the most promise. It is a short turnaround into year 2 for Mike Elko to get this team from plucky as they were in year 1 into competitive and knocking on the door in the playoff. That requires really good portal acquisitions, just bringing in some good players. And you mentioned Concepcion's a big deal. Adding Julian Humphrey from Georgia is a nice piece to add to their secondary as well, which was
not even that.
Guys.
The Craver kid.
Mark Craver from this state, very talented player who could maybe not this year, but the following year end up really emerging. They're doing a lot of the right things. I do agree with you. I agree with you on Marcel Reed. I think that there's a way. And it's not similar because Reed's not like Riley Leonard, but Notre Dame made it as far as they did in the playoff by running the ball, being aggressive about it, and being downhill and using Riley Leonard effectively as a runner. There's a way for them to live and to survive with better receivers than what Notre Dame had last year as a running team that has some big plays in the passing game. But the one thing I do agree with you, Blake, I do need to see some defensive improvements, because down the stretch, those final few games, that was when I was disappointed. The South Carolina game, the Texas game, they made some big plays, but at the same time, they got completely blown past by teams that had some really good athletes. I think that their secondary has a lot better potential this upcoming season, but could a little bit of a reset on their defensive line after Shamar Stewart kind of underwhelmed and was super inconsistent. Shamar Turner and Nick Scourton move on to the NFL.
When they do bring in a couple of defensive linemen here, you bring in Dayon Hayes from Colorado, has a lot of experience. Don't know if he's had that massive year. Now, in 2023, he had 11 tackles for loss, but Joe, a journeyman in a lot of different ways. Has never eclipsed that over 4 sack range. Let's see if Mike Elko can do something very specific with him. You have TJ Surrey from Florida with 4 tackles for loss and 2 sacks a season ago. And you've also tried to rebuild that defensive line. The interesting thing about that, Joe, in reference to me, you had how many dudes got drafted up front? 3? They had 3 guys that got drafted.
They had all 3 of those guys that just named.
I don't know what the depth is going to look like here. Because at the end of the season, at the end of the year, teams physically abused you defensively. I thought you were out of assignment. I thought you were out of gap. Joe, South Carolina had 286 rushing yards against them in the month of November. Jarquez Hunter in overtime went for 130 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Auburn upsets Texas A&M. I look at Texas. Now you only lost 17-7 in a rivalry game. Joe, they ran for 240 yards in a team in Texas that against good opponents could not run the football. Then I turn back to USC. Joe, they scored 35 points in a bowl game against them. Now, I understand that you had some guys out for that game, whatever. But down the stretch in your last 4 games, Joe, you went 0-4.
So here's one thing an angle that's important to talk about. And this is kind of cliche that when you've got a coach who's a second-year coach to bring up. Mike Elko brought Duke to its true potential with a lot of unexpectedly impactful defensive linemen in his second year at Duke. In that next year at Duke. It wasn't his first year. It was that next year when he started to tap into the potential. And he had a lot of guys that he developed along that defensive line that stepped up and ended up being some of the best defensive linemen in the country. I would think that would be where the optimism is. I would think that you would hope, okay, he's had a little time to develop. Mike Elko has always been a developer. You know, we weren't blown away by his recruiting class that he had in 2025. On3 says they had 2 5-star kids who are quality names that they added. He has been a developer. He has been a guy that creates just monstrous players up front along the defensive line. So maybe year 2 is when we see that improvement. And I would hope that if I'm a Texas A&M fan, I'm reading into that history of knowing that he needed a little bit of time to cook.
It very well may, but at the same time at Duke, he didn't have 3 guys that got drafted. And to say that you're going to do that in the SEC with your schedule that you have going up to South Bend, Indiana against Notre Dame, are you going to be able to do that against Texas? It's a much different schedule that he's facing off at A&M. Joe, we're talking about 2 Final Four teams here. One that went to the national championship a year ago. Like, I understand what you're saying about the Duke situation. I also look at it and say, Joe, he might face 2 teams that might make a Final Four here. Like, I don't know. He goes to Baton Rouge in the middle of the season. He's got South Carolina and Lenora Sellers coming into town. I get what you're saying, but it's a completely different opponent that he's seen.
I know that it's not like a 1-to-1 comparison.
It's not.
Right.
I mean, Joe, if they get past Notre Dame, maybe we can have that conversation, right? Like, the conversation can be warranted. But you got to go out there and show against a national contender that you can get it done. What has A&M stigma been? I mean, what has it been for how long? They can recruit their asses off. You get to the – and look, they're going to kill me for this. They think I hate them already. I don't hate you. But the reality is, do you have enough depth right now in year 2 with him? You got some big-name players. You got some very talented human beings. The question will come, Joe, again, they got physically abused down the stretch defensively.
Well, and I just think it's hard to, and this is my whole point. I just think that it's really hard to set that physical tone in year one. I think that it's being physical and being dominant on defense requires buy-in, and it requires a mentality change. It's really hard to do that in 1 year. That's where I'm giving him credit, but I agree with you. Look, I agree on the sense that
most year one situation, I understand what you're saying. For most coaches, yes. We look at a guy that's in the state of Texas and Sark. It's a different thing. Sark didn't have 3 different defensive tackles that got drafted in his year one. Like
he had to recruit for a little bit before.
He had to recruit for a little bit before he built that. Listen, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. He did do it. All I'm saying is it's a different thing that he took over. Right. I mean, completely different situation. By the way, speaking of them defensively, he does have York. He does have Howell. He does have Radcliffe. A lot of production returning. I'm not saying that they're going to be bad defensively. I'm not at all. The question for me is just a depth situation. I do think they have the talent to hang with Notre Dame, Texas, and some of these other teams. Maybe not Texas as much talent. But regardless, they do have a lot of talent. Can you overcome when you need to will be the question mark for me. Joe, before we get out of here, you want to look at their schedule?
Yes. Yep. So they start off the season with UTSA. They also host Utah State. So they got a little bit of an easier opening stretch before they got to get ready to travel to Notre Dame. Bye week versus Auburn, versus Mississippi State, versus Florida. Those are 3 straight home games. Go to Arkansas, go to LSU.
Well, Arkansas is neutral, but
still. Neutral. Yeah. You're right. That's at Jerry
World. Yep.
So that's an important.
Oh no, it's not Jerry World this year. It is in Arkansas. Okay, they got it at Arkansas. It normally was in Jerry World. I forgot about that.
That's weird that they changed that. Bye week at Missouri versus South Carolina versus Samford at Texas. The one thing that catches my attention: there's no Georgia, there's no Alabama on here. They get a lot of, not completely, but a lot of favorable home situations. They get to host South Carolina this year. They get to host Florida. They get to host Auburn. All those games could have been theoretical traps this upcoming season. The tough matchups that they have is having to travel to Notre Dame, having to go to LSU, which I'm sure that will end up being a night game, and having to go to Texas.
They ain't winning the LSU. Listen, call me a homer. They're not winning that game. It's like Ole Miss last year for the Tigers. They're not winning that game, and it won't happen. I don't care how fucking good they are.
Yeah, there's no way back-to-back years, too.
No, not in this situation, not in this climate, not in this economy either. It's one thing I want to point out. Speaking of that LSU game, the week before you go at Arkansas in Fayetteville. Then you go to Baton Rouge, bye week at Missouri.
You don't like that?
No, because Joe, you're gone for
a buy in between, but they get a buy in there though. Like that kind of normally that's like an ugly stretch for teams, but I don't know. I think the buy kind of saves them a little bit.
I don't like it.
Is Missouri really like that scary of a road environment?
No, but
here's Arkansas.
But here's the thing. I know what I was like from 18 to 21, and what a 3-game, even if I had a bye home stretch, would do to our team. It would not have been good.
That's a good point.
It would not have been good because either, Joe, at that point, look, we haven't even talked about the beginning part of this. They have UTSA, Utah State. We're just going to pencil those in as wins. Hell, pin them in as wins for all I care. You go to Notre Dame. You're or you got Auburn at home, Mississippi State and Florida. Joe, they can hit that middle part of October with 2 losses. Everybody's sleeping on Florida now. I'm not doing it. I think Florida can go in there and win. See, I think if they get the 2 losses before that 3-game stretch of away games with the bye, things could get ugly quickly.
The way that I look at this, my final thought, I think that 9-3, 10-2 is doable. That's my ceiling, my floor. How they finish after October is going to tell us. It's not going to be like last year. If they're coming into October with all of those games with 1 loss, oh man, that's going to be tough. They're going to need to steal LSU or Notre Dame or Texas. I don't think Texas is doable. I'm sorry, A&M fans. I don't think that you're going to beat Texas.
I think it can be doable. I think that one can be doable because of where it's going to be played. Yes, the toxicity of where it's going to be played. You got to go to Austin. I don't know. I'm not. I mean, Joe, that game was 17-7 last year.
And that was at home.
I know.
And I think that as we talked about, this Texas team could be better.
They
this
are
upcoming
better.
year.
They're better this year than last year. That's what's scary about them. You might be right. I mean, listen, I'm going to say that here's where I'm at. They're 8-4. I have no idea who they're going to win and beat. They're going 8-4. Prove to me that you can consistently get to 9 games.
I'm going 9-3. I think that 10-2 is plausible. I wouldn't be stunned if 10-2 wasn't on the radar. I believe in Elko. I've said this since the jump, since they hired him. I believe in Mike Elko.
I like him a lot too, but I'm just prove to me. I mean, Joe, again, they're going to kill me for this. At some point, A&M's got to prove with all the preseason hype that they get that they can actually do it.
I won't disagree with that. I mean, that I won't disagree with. That, like, here, I'll say this. This feels like one of the least hyped up years that they've had. Like, I don't think that they're going to get as much hype as I'm giving them right now. Maybe that is what they need, is that they need to fly under the radar. A lot of the things that are going to make them successful are not things that are being talked about by most national hosts. They're not one of the typical teams that are brought up as, and they weren't last year. Last year, nobody thought that they'd be in the mix for the SEC championship game, and they obviously didn't finish.
After the month of November, they weren't close. I mean, here's my biggest concern for them. I don't know if you can fix in one off season. Joe, again, that is a lot of rushing yards you gave up. Joe, they're averaging giving up 250 yards on the ground.
Yeah,
I mean,
they gotta be better.
I mean, that should be alarming to you. By the way, that was with 3 draft dudes. I don't know, man. We'll see. All right, Joe, great show. Any super chats?
Great show.
No.
No,
okay.
No super chats.
Trying to make sure that we're not missing an Elk super chat before we get yelled at again. All right, we'll see y'all again tomorrow, man. Y'all have a good night. Peace.